2024. This is a school board workshop, and the time is 2:30 p.m. Welcome, everyone. Sergeant Arms, has the front lobby been attended to? Yes. Thanks, Chief. For this afternoon, our student representative is Isabel Fowler. Isabel Fowler is a high-achieving junior at Dunbar High School with a perfect 4.0 GPA and a Carson Scholarship to her name. She leads the nationally ranked Dunbar Math Team and Technology Student Association, where she earned numerous state and national awards, including first place in state competitions for the TSA events. Her commitment to learning and leadership extends beyond academics. She tutors students in math and physics, volunteers at Gigi's Playhouse teaching sign language to individuals with Down syndrome, and participates in the Southwest Florida Symphony Youth Orchestra. Isabel's drive and compassion make her a well-rounded leader, dedicated to making a positive impact in her community. Please welcome Isabella. Thank you for joining us. Okay, on the agenda today we have 10 items: job descriptions, construction change order report, construction projects bi-monthly update, Bayshore Elementary School name change, Fort Myers Middle School name change, plan for student enrollment 2025-26, policy review, agenda review of November 6, 2024, public comment, and good of the order and other business. Per board protocol, everyone should strive for 4 minutes for initial comment, 2 minutes for follow-up, for a total of 10 minutes. At this point, we're going to start on agenda item 1 with job descriptions with Angela Montemurano will be presenting. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, board members, Superintendent. Today we have 3 job descriptions before you: a data analyst, a director of government relations, and a talent acquisition representative that you all provided this information beforehand. At this time, I'll ask if you have any questions and put it back to the superintendent.
We just stand ready for any questions the board members may have. I know we covered these in your one-to-ones, but also if you have any questions about it, please feel free to ask them at this time.
Board members, questions, comments? Ms. Jordan.
Thank you. I know we have had conversations on this as you just mentioned, but the Director of Government Relations, when I'm looking at that as the job function, is that person is going to represent the Superintendent School Board in Tallahassee during the session, which I believe that we just hired a person to do that alongside of our lobbyists.
I'm happy to provide detail on that. Yes, so prior in our district, we had several different job classes that have had this. So we more recently, we had a chief that handled this role in addition to communications. We've also had an executive director that has handled these roles in the past. And yes, now we presently, one of the new adjustments we made was we expanded to actually have a coordinator as well. So this director of government relations is, again, not at the executive level, not at the chief level, but is at the director level, which for us does represent for the various different specialized bodies of work within our district. It's not merged with communications. It's specifically focused on providing director level support in that way. The coordinator of government relations would report to the director of government relations, and they work with the lobbyist, which we presently have one lobbyist. Different organizations go about that in different ways, and sometimes they have multiple lobbyists. Their functions are slightly different, as is outlined in the different job descriptions, but they do all fulfill some level of similar functioning. The coordinator provides a level of coordination, whereas the director provides more of the direction, strategic side of it. The coordinator level gets into a lot of the tactical side of that work, both administrative and both have definitely serve in the function of supporting government relations. The lobbyist has a very specialized role in the district as well, and that's a third-party service as well. So any other questions that you may have to clarify on that piece?
Proceed, Ms. Jordan.
Thank you. So I guess my question is, we had, as you said, a person who was a chief, so that position was taken away because we did not need a chief because of the fact that we had the board that we have and the people that, the relationships that our board has with the legislative body, that we really did not need that, and that was stated up here on this dais. And then we had the other position that we just filled last week, 2 weeks ago, and So that person, to me, would have taken over that other position. And now, do we really need this other layer of government relations?
Yeah, happy to follow up. So yeah, the reality for us from a standpoint is we definitely appreciated, chief level leadership when that was what we had in that particular role and position. We did not want to take a step backward. Again, that's administratively, we did not want to go in a different direction, but doing it at the chief level, just to supervise communications and that government relations department was part of, as we were analyzing not just the role function, but also in terms of the fiduciary piece of it. For us, it appeared to be a better recommendation to move at the director level to have that, a director and a coordinator. To us, allows for better breadth of coverage for local, state, and federal. And we certainly wanted to make sure that we had people in place prior to the actual session commencing, but also, for us, this is a priority because we do recognize that having a really productive relationship with a lot of, not just at the traditionally how we've looked at it from a lobbying standpoint and from a session standpoint, what we've also expanded, and this is was part of the dialogue I had with the board members in the one-on-ones, was the importance of kind of our local piece as well. Like, to give you an example, our recent coordinator was at a county commission meeting, has had engagement with some of our different councils, whether it's Cape Coral, whether it's down in Bonita, and so forth. That having an expanded function to be able to really get into our local political elements as well is very helpful to us. For example, we had issues at the county commission meeting that did impact us, and because we had someone there present and has that relationship, that was helpful to us. That's just an example from this week. So yes, very much we don't try to say that a single coordinator position alone would be the full investment. By contrast, like Lee Health, for example, they are the obviously we're the two top employers in the area. They have, I believe, 3 functioning members as part of their, in addition to multiple lobbyists as well. So that's just an example. Obviously different, comparing it's apples and oranges in some ways, but as an entity for us, and again, when Dr. Bernier was here, one of the things we looked at was Orange and their level of engagement and how powerful that could be for us. So we definitely did not want to go in a different direction with government relations. We just went to a more focused direction so it isn't both communications and government relations lumped together. This represents that as well. Hope that helps.
One final thought.
Yes, then we're
Thank you.
going to move on. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that, Mr. Fisher. But what I guess my thought process here is that we did have a person who was a chief, but we weren't going to get rid of the chief. So we created a different position for that person to move into versus creating this director and moving him into that position or that individual into that position. So to me, I'm just trying to understand why we would create a different position, move him over there, move an individual over there, now create another position, and now this one is open to go out to whomever, right?
It's a great opportunity to clarify, yes. So we didn't create a new position for individuals on that piece. There is an existing job description and a particular unit that individuals get transferred into. We didn't create a job. This represents the creation of a new job description, a job description that did not exist for us. So they are separate: position, job description, so forth. The job description coming forward represents the commitment organizationally to have a director level guidance for government relations. The unit and individuals serving in those different pieces are separate aspects, right? So the unit funding of a director level, which could equate to any of the government relation, like this or any other director level job description would be associated with that unit, is a separate item, right? This is strictly the job description that is in front of you. And so the particular situation you're discussing with an employee in it, that individual migrated into a director level position, not a created new position, but an existing job description in a unit that allowed that individual to move in. And again, that is a pretty common organizational practice for us in the district when we have lateral moves of folks, or in some cases if it's not lateral, if they're actually going down in a particular unit, but not to be conflated with what we're talking about here today. So I hope I'm trying to explain without talking about individual people by name. I'm just trying to give you the kind of the structural aspect of that.
Ms. Giovanelli?
So my question would be, the applicants that were for the coordinator position, could those applicants apply for this director position if they qualified, obviously?
Absolutely, yeah.
And, okay, so, and then my other question would also be, Ms. Jordan mentions another employee. Could that employee also apply for this director position?
Yes, anyone who meets the qualifications for this position, if it were then, so this, all you'd be approving today is just the job description. If we were to have it connected to a unit that is funded and then a person applies for it, anyone who is able to apply, I mean, anyone can apply for any job if they meet the qualifications then for that job based on what's posted in this that you have in front of you, they would be considered and so forth. And the most highly qualified folks would be the ones that you would be brought forward as a recommendation if we were to move forward with taking this job description, applying it to a unit, and then posting that as a vacancy, which again, for us, that would be certainly our intention is to take a job description, apply it to a unit, and then post and go through a hiring process for this type of position.
So you anticipate to, once this is approved today, that you would be, the advertising would be pretty much immediately, so that we would have, I'm assuming they would, the coordinator as well as the director would be attending when we go to like Tallahassee and Jacksonville, Tallahassee when we go there, and then also like FSBA and stuff like that, so that they can meet other directors of government relations, as you know, because that's
Precisely.
that networking and hearing what other districts do, or what they're working together, that's really key.
Precisely. That is the full intention, but again, you have to have the qualified person to do it. So we can have every intention of posting it. That doesn't necessarily guarantee us that we'd have the qualified applicants, but that's certainly the intention.
Okay, great, thank you.
Anyone else need to move on at time? Okay. Thank you, Ms. Morano. Okay, next up, item number 2 on the agenda, construction change order report, and that will be with Scott Rickenbauer and Melissa Rivera.
Good afternoon, board members. Superintendent Savage, Esquire de Pay Bruno. I am here, Scott Rickenbacker, Director of Construction, with Melissa Rivera, my coordinator in the construction department. We're going to start off with the change order report. We've imported 2 months. The first report that you would have received would have been for August of 2024. As you'll see on the sheet, we had returns to the district and direct material purchases, $78,093.59. Non-direct change orders with a credit $529,896.52 returned back to the district. Those items were 3 DMP change orders, 4 change orders. 1 was a credit, 1 was an add, 1 was an extension of time only, and 1 was value engineering reductions to some of the projects in the second sheet, which is the backup. And we had 13 contingency adjustments relating to the FMTC Academy, Franklin Parks Elementary, and the Gateway Elementary Traffic Improvement Program. If you go to page 2, you'll see the breakout of those items. Are there any questions on the breakouts and the projects related to the August change order report?
Board members, questions, comments, concerns? Okay, seeing none.
All right. Next up, we have the September of 2024 change order report as required by statute. On the cover sheet, you will see that we return non-material direct change orders in the amount of $63,038.10 to the district. This equated to 0 DMP change orders, that's direct material purchases for that month, 2 change orders, a credit of unused funds back to the district, and the change order add was a DMP reconciliation. And what that means is if they didn't reach their DMP goal in tax savings, we have to reconcile the account and provide that money back to the contract. And we had 4 contingency adjustments relating to G. Weaver Hips and the Riverdale project. And the second sheet is the actual reporting. Are there any questions on the September reporting?
Board members, questions, comments? Seeing none? For that?
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I'm trying to speed this for you. I know you got a busy day. So.
Thank you. So we're going to move on to item number 3, construction projects bi-monthly update.
Ready?
Give me 1 second.
If you hit that window. Don't listen to me.
Yeah, give me a second.
Boom. First page. First page, we discuss Bayshore K-8 expansion. As you can see in the numbers, we've had our phase 1 has been approved. We've been doing design. We currently have a 30% design schematic set of drawings and an associated estimate. We received the 30% drawings on October 15th. The architectural estimate for that work is $38,308,578, and the comparison with the contractor's estimate for that project is $42,512,306. We have a 60% estimate that we'll be receiving on December 2nd, so the next reporting you'll actually see as this starts to go into design development, how those numbers start to congeal, come closer to closer, and whether they're moving up a little bit or coming down in scope. Any questions on Bayshore?
Board members, Bayshore questions? Okay.
Okay. Next up is Bonita Springs Elementary rebuild and remodel. We previously had a 30% estimate of about $33.2 million from the architect, and for the construction manager, $32.4 million for that project. 60% design drawings will be completed and delivered to the district with an estimate at that time from the architect on November 25th, and we're currently waiting on a recommendation from the board in regards to the historical building.
You have any comments, Superintendent?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So just as a reminder, in the board member one-to-ones, we started producing some, one of the things you look for to this role is to make recommendations. We've had some substantial engagement with Bonita really since, ongoing, but since April, May, June, July, and so forth related to this particular topic. There does come a point at which the engagement can delay construction timelines, and I think that's critical. We're already well aware of the additional $10 million request. We did receive a letter from the mayor down in Bonita requesting a joint workshop with our governance team. That's something we had received. I did want to make sure you at least had that draft content. I've included, not only do we have the draft in our board member one-on-ones, but it's also as part of our executive content here. That said, you look to me to make recommendations. My recommendation would be, while we certainly, value and appreciate the commitment to preservation of history, we certainly have that value as community members. For us, our real chief priority is the educational impact for students, and we recognize that is, for us, at least in the executive function I serve, that is really our prevailing approach to how we approach capital projects. And when the dollar values that are invested, we've seen significant inflation, significant cost increases in our construction projects to add the needed capacity we have in the East Zone in particular. Every amount of money we have from our capital standpoint is strained. We've had to cut meaningful maintenance projects, capital projects to try to accommodate this. While we certainly sympathize with the desire for history and for history's sake, and we value that, we also have to be efficient with the taxpayer resources that we're given, and it's tough. It's very difficult decisions. So for me, the recommendation is that we proceed with the board-approved original plan to move forward with the designs that we had. We've commissioned additional things at our own cost to produce additional plans and so forth. But again, when those things amount to nearly $10 million of additional added cost, that also makes it more difficult for us to then be able to deliver the best-in-class education, additional seats that we could do at that particular site to allow it to be more functional. That is just something that, from a recommendation standpoint, I would recommend we move with the plan that has been proposed and adopted by the board initially, and that we not deviate from that course at this time. That said, we do owe the Bonita council a response, and that's why we have that draft response prepared at this time. That said, I will be happy to take any direction from the board or have any additional, answer any questions you may have related to this particular topic.
Thank you, Dr. Savage. Board members, comments, questions on direction? Ms. Patrica.
Thank you. I don't recall, and do you recall off the top of your head, if I may, through the chair, how many seats would $10 million create for our kids out east? Do you remember that number? I know I asked for it a while ago and you gave it to me, but I don't remember.
It depends on, of course, what format, but we did produce an estimate of like, in the, say, like portables or so forth, that piece, and I'm sure while I'm here, we could get that information.
I think that's a really important number for us all to grasp and understand and sort of lead conversations with, because for me, that's that's what's driving my decision. The fact that I would love to preserve a historic building front in a community that, frankly, I mean, I'm elected from Bonita Springs. That's one of the areas in my district. But at the same time, I have, I think, a greater responsibility to make sure our students have seats that are safe and our staff has safe places to work. And that $10 million will go a long way toward creating that. So you have my support for moving forward, and those numbers I'd like the board to have, because it makes my decision easier. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else want to give? Ms. Jordan?
And Dr. Savage, if you could please remind me, I thought in the conversation that the historic part would not have any really outcomes for our children in that area.
Yeah. Yes, so great, two great questions. I want to just answer the first question that came through Ms. Patrica. So, and as I imagined, right here, we have $5 million, for example, could deploy as 20 portables, which would add 400 to 425 seats, and that's half of that dollar value. To answer Board Member Jordan's question, on top of that, and I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I say it correctly again, it was the building itself. It's actually an administrative building, so we're not able to house students in that building, and even if it were to be stabilized, it doesn't change the purpose of the ability to do that. An addition work would have to be behind, and it would change that design work accordingly. So yes, that building itself is actually administrative in function too.
Thank you.
Others? May I give some comment? Please. Okay, thank you. And actually a question. Dr. Savage, was there discussions or consideration of offering the building in the current state over to the city of Bonita Springs?
Yes, Chairman. We offered to not only potentially give them the land and the building of that particular area, because if that was the only way that it could be maintained, we were willing to go to that length. They were not interested in that.
Okay, thank you. And as Ms. Patrica said, as I said, I think we need to look at, what is obviously best for the students. Is tough because obviously it's a part of their history. We get that. But for us, it's got to be students first, and especially the enrollment, especially how we're looking at numbers throughout this entire district. We know what we're up against right now. I look at it, they're going to get a state-of-the-art, looks like a beautiful school that we're putting down there that's really going to serve the needs and have some really fascinating things in there. And I think we shouldn't, as a board and as a district, lose sight of that when we're talking to our friends down in Bonita. The other thing is I would love to see, and I know we've kind of talked about this, would be to work with the city down there and if maybe the historical commission on that, and seeing however we can do to kind of dedicate and reflect and try to preserve that little piece of history through, for example, we're talking about, I believe Edgewood Academy, I just went out the other day, has that arch that, kind of is a dedication to them. So maybe we can do a dedication with, some bricks or something. However, we can work together with them on that, pass this decision. But I would agree moving forward, as I said, for myself, so. Ms. Giovanelli?
And funny that you said that, because I mentioned that to Dr. Savage about saving the bricks, but the bricks are like crumbling, because that was the question. But maybe there's some kind of something they could do, and we got educators that are pretty smart, so I don't know, maybe they can figure some way to preserve something. I think it's a great idea, because I understand where the city of Bonita is coming from, but at the end of the day, we're here to educate students, and Ms. Patrica brings up the most important point is that would not add seats to the school. It's only administrative, so unfortunately, that's what that building is. So, thank you.
Before I ask for general directions, anyone have any other comments or anything they want to add to this discussion? Okay, board, do you guys agree to go forward with the letter as constituted, excuse me? So I don't know if you need a yes, nods, thumbs up. Do you have your direction, Mr. Superintendent?
I do. Thank you, Chairman.
Next up, we have Cape Coral Technical College. As you can see, we had a 60% estimate prior to you of $20.7 million from the architect and $22.9 million from the construction manager. We are preparing to, we just put the ITN bid out for the demolition of the old Hector Caffaretta building, so our anticipation is to have that knocked down starting in January and being completed by April 1st to allow for the construction schedule of Cape Coral Tech expansion to occur on schedule. We expect a 90% design estimate on November 19th, so in your next reporting, you'll have that estimate in front of you to see, and 90% is pretty close. That's about where we draw the line. That in real time, that's about what the cost of construction is going to be when the bid comes out a couple months after. There is some discussion. We had to do some VE to stay within the board-approved budget of $25 million. There was a third classroom that was not linked to a laboratory, so we VE'd out some square footage in order to maintain the budget. There have been discussions where the school has requested that that classroom square footage be put back into, which would require an increase of the budget. Right now I'm forecasting about $1.5 million. We are still moving forward with the original design and the budget is planned. So those are things that operations is working right now with the school and senior management to determine how we move forward with that. But I'll be looking for a direction, clarity to complete the drawings and get those drawings out to bid shortly. Next up is Cypress Lake Middle School. We previously reported at 60%, $94 million from the architect, 105.2 from the construction manager. We're out there setting portables. If you've driven by, the portable complex is already being erected out on that campus. Next step is a 90% design estimate, which was received, so we just received that. The architectural estimate right now is coming in at $93.7 million, and we're expecting the CM, it's usually about another week to 2 weeks after the drawings are issued. We expect the CM estimate to be to us on November 8th, so that'd be next week. And we've pushed the substantial completion date to 1/1/27 for that school to be reopened. So, and the reason for that was the original $10 million for the portable complex was not included in phase 1. We wanted to competitively bid it and have it bid with the phase 2 work. So that's what pushed it approximately 6 months. So you'll see us reporting the substantial revised for that project will be 1/1/27. So there'll be a move into that school over Christmas break. The children transition from the portable campus into the new buildings, and the substantial will be attained on the first of the year. Any questions on that slide?
Ms. Jordan?
So all the portables that are being moved over there, they're finished their renovations?
Well, we're installing them. They were previously renovated over at the Franklin Parks before we moved them. That's what we did over the summer with our portable refurbishment line item, yearly line. And there will be some minor connections and some touch-up as we're putting the two halves together and jacking them up. But yes, they've already been refreshed and now they're being connected.
Thank you.
Anybody else before we move on? Go ahead.
Okay. Next up is Hector Caffaretta Junior K-8 Elementary new school build. We just received 60% design development drawings on Halloween, 10/31/24. We're currently having about monthly meetings with all entities and the principals and the parties involved, so that project is moving forward. Minor adjustments to the campus in terms of the flow of the school, areas that are located in the front administration office area and so forth. So that job is moving forward. As you're aware, you approved $124.9 million in June of 2024 for that project, and the substantial completion remains August 1st of 2026 to reopen that school for the start of that school year.
Questions, comments? Mr. Rickenbacker, are we still on track, excuse me, I can't think of the word track right now, for April shovel in the ground?
Everything is looking that way. Obviously, we're predicated with South Florida Water Management
Yes.
and Army Corps permitting. Okay. I can tell you that with the elections that happened last night, the regime that put in with the state of Florida for our local South Florida Water Management to oversee the FWC, the federal permitting of species, okay. I'm hopeful for all my projects that that gets reverted. back. We're locally Florida, we do those permits, and that can accelerate many of the projects you see that are in our capital plan. So I'm excited that hopefully that'll help me not sit for a year.
Okay.
I will tell you that we're now required on all our sites, even if I'm doing modifications, to do a bonneted bat survey. That just came down. Usually, and that's even on Cypress, Bayshore, all these that already have campuses there. Unfortunately, that's FWC. So just so you know, you'll start seeing some of that in my contingency adjustments. Any questions on Hector?
See none.
Next is Innovation Preschool. We came out with 30% estimates of $138.8 million from the architect and $142 million from the construction manager. Obviously, that is much higher than what the board has approved, which you just upped it to $128.5 million. So unfortunately, I'm probably the most hated individual in the district. I'm like the English teacher with a red pen. I've got to value engineer the project down. So we have 60% estimates due in January, and I had to give clear direction and design direction in order to meet the schedule. So we've had meetings. We have cut. We've gone from 238,000 square feet, a lot of it open floor space planning, and we've reduced it to 202,000 square feet. It's a major VE effort. We've reduced approximately 36,000 square feet of construction cost. We've reduced some of the finishes. There was a lot of fancy clear glass folding walls and things that were extremely costly storefronts rather than hollow metal window systems. So we've brought it back. I've given my team the direction that I will not come back to the board for more than the 128.5 all in, everything, FF&E and all. We gave them a construction design budget of $111 million. The rest going to 128.5 represents our FF&E, our design fees, and all those things on our side of the fence. That brings it up to the 128.5. So we're moving forward on that. We've been working with curriculum, and I think everybody's on the page, and I think we're doing well. Any questions?
Questions? Ms. Patrica?
Thank you. So with value engineering, all of that out of it, is it still an innovation school? If I may, through the chair, yes.
Well, that's one of the things we're actually trying to move kind of away from is that term. We recognize that it's more representative of partnership and so forth, but is it truly innovative? I would say less so if you're talking about the physical side of it. But I would say there isn't, some of the concepts that were being touted as innovative actually represented a lot of the building design that was utilized in the 70s as well. And so where they had movable walls to open up more flexible learning spaces. So, innovation probably is in the eye of the beholder. But I would say from a design standpoint, we have an obligation, similar to our earlier conversation about Bonita and so forth. We have our dollars, we have to stretch them as far as they can go to support student capacity. And so that is our priority. And so we certainly want to have state-of-the-art ideal facilities. But if our partners aren't coming up with additional capital resources to supplement that, we're going to have to stay within our budgets, which are board approved and are predicated on the types of cost per student station square footage that we can defend, that allow us to have a great learning environment, but do so in an efficient, cost-effective way. So I would argue they will find the best way to be innovative and honestly with a design build such as this, you do have opportunities for creativity. It's not your prototype that's set in that same type of piece, but under Mr. Rickenbacher's direction, certainly that is the expectation, is that we will do the best we certainly can within the dollars that the board has approved and not exceeding that.
Yeah, and I'm in no way suggesting that we increase. I think the value adjustments have been or value engineering has been necessary. My question is more about transparency and whether this is, should we continue to call it this when we're being briefed and when we're out in the public talking about it, or should it be called the FGCU Partnership School? Something just more clear that lets the public know what it is. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Persons and Ms. Juvenile.
And I don't have the history, Ms. Morgan, on this. But it was my understanding that FGCU was actually going to help us fund some of this school at one time. We had talked about it, and now that's off the table. It's just more of a partnership by sending students to learn.
I'm not aware of any time where they were really committed to funding. There may have been entertaining the idea of potential fundraising, but
Okay.
in terms of committed funds, I have no recollection of any. I mean, obviously, this predates me as well as goes all the way back to Dr. Atkins, who really was instrumental, I think, in trying to have a partnership. And I think we're all very committed to partnership. But no, I would say I don't have any recollection of really funds. I think it was always one of the challenges of this project was that we were really the sole responsible entity when it came to the resource side of it, when it came to that aspect of it, to clarify.
Would this be something possible for our new Director of Government Relations to look into for some state funding along with the government relations of FGCU? Because I know they have silos of money also that maybe we could get a grant to help get a little bit more money to help us construct this and actually put more innovative features in there.
Yeah. That's a fantastic question. I think one of the opportunities you have is that, and we've mentioned this through some of the iterations of these prior discussions, prior boards and so forth, is that the way our state designs, there actually is an educational trust. There's a whole separate allocation in some cases that is available to, say, charters, lab school charters and so forth that is permissible for those that districts can't access, but that lab charters, so specifically ones that are affiliated with universities, have the ability to gain an entire set of additional funding potentially. That's what most of the lab schools in our state, they are able to access additional funding. There's also, of course, direct legislative, and absolutely there's no doubt there are different unique grants. In some cases, it's maybe the physical aspect that could be innovative. It could be the technology inside. It could be merging, things, all sorts of different things. So yes, lots of opportunity and a great avenue for additional advocacy through that type of lens.
Thank you. That's all I had.
Okay, then Ms. Juvenelli, followed by Ms. Morgan.
Well, a little bit of history on this was, I think, and I'm hoping I'm going to say her name right, Dr. Uni, and I don't know what if that was her last name. This was her vision, and unfortunately she was, she passed away and wasn't able to actually have more involvement in for her vision. So I love what Mr. Persons has mentioned, and I understand what Dr. Savage is talking about, but I think I'm like I agree. If it's not going to be innovative, so what is it going to be? I think that's part of telling our story and getting the information out there of what we're actually doing. Are we just going to call it a K-8 until it gets named something? Because I don't believe we're going to have the support from FGCU. And if it's a partnership, so what are they? They're partnering by sending their students to help us. So what I think we would need to have more detailed information of exactly what that is before we proceed further calling it something that we don't know what to call it. So, I would like to see some more conversation around what this is going to be. And, 1.28 million is a lot of money. So what that involves is really key. And I know this is going to be a different model because it's on a smaller piece of property than what we normally have had. Technically the history on this is the third landing space this school has tried to land. This is the third piece of property, right? 1, 2, 3, yeah, I believe. So, I think that's important because we keep, I don't know, sometimes I feel like we're getting the cart before the horse and on this, and I think we need to really decide what we're doing with this then and how this is what this looks for the community and tell that story. That's my point. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you. Ms. Morgan?
Yeah, there really wasn't any financial investment on the part of FGCU as I understood it. However, they were going to provide instruction and curriculum. That was a significant resource, and all of that has gone away. So to me, really the only path forward, if you want to do something innovative, is to go the lab school route and see if you can get FGCU to step up in that way. But to me, they're out of the picture from a financial point of view. Thank you.
Anyone else before we move on? Mr. Rickenbacker.
Next up is Elementary School A. If you're not familiar, that's off of 82. That's a dual, possibly a three-school site long-term in the 10-year plan. Opening the same year will be L Elementary and OO Middle School right there on the corner. As you'll see, we reported 60% design was due October. We actually did get that today. 60% architectural estimate currently is at $74 million, $74,072,700. We expect the construction manager's estimate next week. That's up $2 million from the 30% estimate from the architect of $72 million and $70 million respectively from the construction manager in my previous reporting to you. This is one of the schools that once 100% design drawings are achieved, I put it up on the shelf until South Florida Water Management and Army Corps approves the permitting. So I'm not too concerned. I'm not going to break the red pen out just yet, but as soon as I know that this permitting can be released, we're going to bring that back into the board-approved budget as well, doing value engineering to trim it down within a cost-effective means and methods. Currently, right now, that is going to be a shelter school, and just to give you an idea, per square foot, that particular school is $537 per square foot. Much of that is the ICC 500, where 50% of a EHPA shelter has to be hardened. So that drives the cost. What used to be where we negotiated with EOC and had a value on a school of about $1.5 million. When we do the ICC 500, we're at about a $6 million price tag add to this school in terms of sheltering costs. So that's just something to keep in the back of your mind, that shelters aren't cheap anymore. Any questions?
Anyone? Thank you.
Okay, next up is Elementary School M. That's out in the east zone. That's on one of our newer properties that was recently purchased. We have moved this 30% design documents we showed on our previous reporting of October 29th, 2024. We've moved that to December 15th of 2024. We hadn't owned the property, so we did not release our architectural team to start the designs until we actually closed and owned that property. That was the reason for the push to December 15th for the 30% schematic drawing documents. So in our next update, you will see some 30% cost estimates and design and some conversation on that school as well. Next up is High School NNN. We had an estimate of 60% estimate from the architect of $153.9 million and the construction manager of $161.8 million. Right now, we are looking for the design to be completed in March of 2025 and a substantial completion for this school based on the capital plan of June of 2028. Our next step would be a 90% design estimate and drawings coming to us on the end of this month, November 29th, 2024, and that will tighten up and bring those numbers back into line. If I'm not mistaken, I believe we're at a budget approved of $162.2 million. So again, that school, when the design documents, if we don't have permitting, will sit until I can't hold bids. When I put a bid out, they're good for 30 days. So the drawings are still good, but I don't want to put bids out now. I get a false number to you folks, and then when we go to engage in the contract, they've got their hands out again due to inflation and things of that nature. So again, these are all things that I'm hopeful Army Corps gets released back to us, because it's going to help our projects and possibly save money if we can get these going earlier for the district.
Any questions, anyone? Ms. Patrica?
Oh, sorry.
I'm actually back on slides 8 and 9. Can I? Do you mind?
Of course.
Thank you. So I'm seeing 2 elementary schools that appear to have the same number of seats, but a significantly different cost. Is there a reason for that, please?
Yes. Yes. Okay, so L is on the dual site, as I mentioned previously. All of the site work and the permitting for that dual site, like I did at MM Middle,
Yep.
New Lambs, and a Manasseh, all the site work was done on the Lambs project.
Yep.
And Manasseh came in much cheaper because it was just the footprint of the building plopped on the already developed land. So that's the difference. M has to be fully developed.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Ms. Morgan?
Yeah, so going forward, is there a way to do a per station or per student cost so that the board can actually compare it by level the costs of these properties and ask the kind of question that Mrs. Patrica asked?
We've actually, it's funny you should ask that. We've had a meeting with the superintendent. I think it's too much for this meeting. I'm sure he'll be talking to you on your one-on-ones. Melissa created, the brains of my operation, created a spreadsheet that shows with the state where we've been. We went back all the way to Bonita High School, and I used it as an inflationary tool to show the upward climb. We also used it as a cost per square foot. We're using it at also a comparative analysis of us and our projects based on square footage, student population against other competitive districts of our size throughout the state. So literally, we just had that meeting, was it yesterday? And we are compiling additional information, and I'm sure that when we're ready to give that to the super, he can discuss that at length with you on your one-on-ones or a presentation, whatever.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Mr. Rickenbacker.
Okay, so that was, where did we left off? We finished NNN, we're on this is the sister school on the dual site on 82. We have an original estimate, 90% of 112.8 million from the architect, 123.7 from the construction manager. We have, drawings are 100% complete. We are sitting on them, waiting for the permitting as we speak. We're anticipating, based on what we saw, the worst-case Army Corps timeline, we're anticipating, if that runs its course, the full length, that will be coming to you August 14th of 2026 with a GMP Phase 2.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
One second. What was that, Ms. Morgan? Sure, of course. I was not able to understand you from all the way down here, so thank you. Go ahead. Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Thank you. Okay, please proceed.
Okay, so we were talking originally, this is one where the drawings are complete and it's sitting, waiting for Army Corps approval. If it runs out its full duration, which at the beginning could be up to 24 months with Army Corps, it looks like August 14th of 2026. That's why I'm hopeful if we can get these permits released with a change in the governance, that maybe that can accelerate and bring these things forward, obviously saving potential years of inflation as well if I can get out the bid earlier. Any questions?
Questions, anyone? Go ahead.
Okay, we're getting close. And I do have a fun video for you. Quick, 15 seconds. Riverdale High School remodel, you're aware, $108 million. Substantial completion is still on target for August 4th of 2025. Currently, we're in the interior renovation of the existing buildings. The gym structural decking is all complete and fabricated. We're drying that building in so interior finishes can begin. I think we've painted the bar joists, so the ceiling in the gym, the bar joists are actually painted the, I want to say Chianti in gold, the school color, so it's starting to come together. It looks really good. Off-site traffic improvements have begun out there. That's where we have to put a traffic signal in to navigate and complete all of our site work, which will be in the summer of 2025. So that work is going on as well. Are there any questions on Riverdale?
Ms. Juvenile?
That's garnet and gold, just for the record, not Chianti, just.
I'm from Jersey.
I'm from Riverdale.
Next up is the VPAA renovation, Lemuel Teal renovation in the Black Box Theater. We have a board-approved capital plan budget of $55.4 million. We're still working within that. We don't see any changes. Right now, the Teal upgrades to the interior of the school, windows, HVAC, roof replacement, is about 50% complete. The VPAA upgrades, again, that's air handling units in that school, carpeting upgrades, and so on and so forth, is 50% complete. And the Black Box Theater is 35% complete. The structure is actually up in the short little time-lapse video I show you, will give you an indication what that looks like. Are there any questions on VPAA?
Anybody
And
have
TU?
any?
And that's it. So this is our time-lapse video of the erection of the Black Box Theater. These are the precast panels being stood, interior supports. That's about 2 weeks' worth of work right there.
Cool.
And then we have one more picture, which is
Hold
the,
on. Forward. Nope, that's not going forward. There we go.
and that's just a picture, an aerial picture with a drone zooming in on the overall product as we fix it in. So we're getting ready to structurally connect that, dry it in, and get the interior finishes going. Now, you ask me, what is that on the front of the building? Those are arts symbols that are embedded into the precast, similar to the things we did at Gateway High School. The first one from left to right is obviously painting. The second one are ballerina shoes, and the third one is a violin. So as that paper is pulled off and it's cleaned up and a different color accent on those things, that'll be what the garnishments on the outside of that building.
Garnishment, not garnet.
True. And that completes our presentation. Any questions?
Okay. Ms. Jordan.
Thank you for, did you know I was going to ask you that question? About what we were looking at? But do you order those? Is that what it is? It's like, I want,
They provide, we try to come up with creative ways that we can work with the precast panels that don't cost any extra. And when the concrete's wet, to have a stencil and plop it in there when it hardens. And then we just use a different color paint when we paint it. It's just, it's an easy way to add some accent without spending money on adding those louvers on the outside of the building and all those things that serve no purpose but cost money.
no, thank you. I think it looks
And
great.
yes, I had to ask the architect today what they were, because I said, where's the theater stuff in this? And Melissa, the brains got it right
You
on.
can see it.
She picked up on it right away, so.
No, that's great. And I just want to say thank you too. And then, because I know you just went over all this and all that money and everything, that's why it is so important, that half-cent sales tax. So, because there's a lot of money that you just
Well,
spoke to us about.
Ken knows my new line now. Is it a want or a need? And we are in a mode in this district, $500 million, we had to trim. There's a lot of work that needs to be done and not a lot of funding.
Can I just say something?
Okay. Ms. Patrica, then Ms. Langford Fleming.
Thank you. Just a suggestion that we think about perhaps marketing this facility for outside use to bring some money in. I know that initially part of our partnership with Estero through that education initiative was to use the theater at Estero to bring in like traveling troops or whatever. Troop isn't the right word, but you know what I mean, traveling people who put on shows. Okay, and which would have brought money into the school. So just something to think about going forward. Thank you.
And Ms. Patrica, if I may, Melissa did, in the following pages, you see them up there now, with my monthly report that I provide to the officers in operations, you'll see those columns that you had requested
For all
showing
the
it.
projects.
So they're in there.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Ms. Langford Fleming, then followed by Ms. Juvenelli. I do want to note to everyone, we're a little behind on time. Mr. Rickenbacker went more than 15 seconds video. It'd be 16 seconds, so that's why. Go ahead.
All right, there goes my 3% bonus right out the window.
I should have raised my hand faster because that's one of the two questions I had, Ms. Patrica. I was trying to think about what an amazing facility this is for that part of the community and how could they share it with outside vendors. So that was question one, already been answered. Question two is, and I know we've heard over and over again about how much a footprint saves our district when we can come up with one footprint, share it throughout the schools. And this is such a surface question, but I did work in the district when we built the L schools, and then we took over some grocery marts, and those all looked the same. So we had the L schools that all looked exactly the same, or just turned a different way. We had the other schools that looked exactly the same. So my question is, because we have this amazing facility down in Bonita that we've talked about, and I've seen the, the preliminary plans, what are we doing as a district just to keep our campuses unique from one another? I mean, is that something that comes into play? I know money is obviously an issue there, but is there something just pre-planning about keeping our campuses unique from one another, so I'm not in the East Zone and four schools look exactly the same and you can't tell if it's a middle and elementary or a high? Just a question.
The structure and the layout, for all intent and purposes, remains the same. And there's an academic reason for that, going all the way back to when Dr. Browder was the superintendent. It was the administration's ability to get into a point in the building and see all areas down the hallway and manage the student population during bell change. So that brings up the I or the T format. Now, we do let architects, within reason, go out and provide aesthetics on the inside of the building and exterior building that we can afford within our budgets to try and give each school its own appearance, its own flavor. But we can't, the benefit of a prototype is not making those changes, and you benefit by getting the design at half the cost. So to give you just a rough example, when we did Gateway High School, that was the Bonita design, moved forward and slightly modified. We paid $2.3 million for that architectural fee. The high school that was supposed to go out in the Cape that has been pulled off the 10-year, put on hold, the architectural design for that school, it's going to be a fresh design, 2,800 students, was going to be almost $9.5 million. So the state statute recommends you use a prototype reuse if you have used that same prototype within 3-year period of the new school. So they recommend it for those cost savings. But yes, we try not to stifle the things, the gingerbread, and then things that give the accents that give that school its own identity.
Thank you. I did know the answer to that question. I just want our families to hear why so many of our schools look similar from one to the other. I wanted them to understand since these are their schools. But thank you for going over that, and thank you for the presentation. Appreciate the updates.
You're welcome.
Ms. Giovanelli?
So I know this is a shared black box between the two schools. When do they plan on, like, are they going to name it something? You know, obviously it's not going to be named, you know what I mean?
We just came up with that. Because the school, the facility is not directly linked to either campus on that site, we've picked finishes that are amicable to both school sites. So the carpet inside the facility, the same carpet that's used in both Lemuel Teal and VPAA has been used in there. We did not use their school colors per se. We picked other generic colors that would blend in. And the name of the facility, we're calling it the Performing Arts Theater. There is no official name, but if you want to sell rights to the name in the future, and certainly you can, we're calling it the Performance Art Theater. That is not up on the building. That might be on any wayfinding signs, and it would only be on the building plaque, the bronze plaque, the dedication plaque. So in terms of what you would like to add to the face of that building, I'll leave it up to greater minds than mine to come up with that, and hopefully you can get a little bit of cash for the capital fund.
Thank you, because that was what I was going to ask about, is if, to sell the naming rights. So we have that with other opportunities at other schools, so I would love to see that for this community. So thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Rickenbacker.
Have a great day, everybody.
Appreciate
Thank you for your time.
Okay, moving on to item number 4 will be Bayshore Elementary School name change. And we'll have our North Region Associate Superintendent, Ms. Trent, joining us today. And also, I know Ms. Morgan mentioned down there, Isabella, if you do have a question, feel free to raise your hand, okay? Thank you. Microphone, Ms. Trent, sorry. Or maybe it needs to come closer to you.
Thank you. I
There you
appreciate
go.
your
Thank
system.
you.
Well, good afternoon, Board and Superintendent and Ms. Dupree-Bruno. I'm grateful to be able to present on behalf of Mr. Osman, who is the principal of Bayshore Elementary. And he is wanting to request a name change for the school. So this is pursuant to School Board Policy 9.10, school names. And his process was, obviously, he's converting from a K-5 elementary school to a K-8. So he got together an ad hoc committee. That committee was formed, and they came up with several possibilities for the name of Bayshore Elementary, a new name. They sent out a survey that was distributed to all stakeholders. Once the survey was sent out over time, there was about a 3-week time period that stakeholders had an opportunity to provide their input, to select their choice, and then the results were reviewed by the committee members final rankings came in, and then the information was presented to the SAC committee, and now the results are going to be shared at the board briefing today. These are the members of the ad hoc committee, which was teachers, secretary, parents, students. And then this is the timeline. So they began in May and they completed the process in June. And these were the options. It was Bayshore, the Bayshore School, Bayshore Academy, or other. And the Bayshore Academy was the one that rose to the top at 46.7%. And one of the reasons why they were considering this name is because they want it to be a center for learning and for rigorous academics, and also give him an opportunity as grades 7 and 8 are added to potentially define what that academy would be. So then he's not having to maybe come back to the drawing board again and do another name change. So that was one of the considerations for that. And that's really all there is. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to take those.
Do you have anything to add, Dr. Savage?
I do not, Chairman.
And just for reference, what do you need out of the board today?
So my understanding, based on the procedure for the policy, that essentially it gets briefed to the board at this piece, and then at the next action meeting, the board would have to accept whether, and provide any feedback and so forth based on the recommendation, because obviously the board gets to make that final decision.
Thank you, Dr. Savage. Okay. Board members, feedback, comments? Mr. Persons.
Yeah, I think I'm all for it. Personally, going with the recommendation of Bayshore Academy. I think that sounds good for that school and for their future. I know they already have a new logo, Buccaneers, so go Bucks. But I like it. Right now, everybody just says Bayshore.
That's right.
That's all.
Okay. Others? Ms. Jordan?
I guess I was looking at both, because one's coming to get rid of academy because it's not an academy. But then we see, because when I was looking at this, and I'm all for the K-8 at Bayshore, but when I looked at this and I seen academy, right off the top of my head, it's like, academy of what? What does that define? And yes, I just heard that for the future, but is that something that, is that telling the true story of who they are at this moment? So that's the only thing that I wanted to say.
May I respond to that? Okay, thank you. I did ask Mr. Osmond the same thing. We had a discussion about that, and that was where the focus on learning came in, because when you talk about what an academy maybe represents, it could be a specialized program, but it could also be considered a center of higher learning or rigorous learning, and that's what they want their focus to be. So I guess that was part of what the ad hoc committee had discussed at that time, and that was one of the reasons why including the word academy was a part of that, but then also thinking about the future as well.
Thank you. Ms. Patrica?
Yeah, I'm not sure that this meets the requirements of our policy. Policy 7250, 6A, school names may include the word academy only if they are secondary schools in which the curriculum is deliberately narrowed, focused, or delimited, such as being directed towards specific vocational, occupational, or professional paths. So as much as I like the sound, it's a policy violation to go with Bayshore Academy. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Did you want to join in, Dr. Savage?
Yeah, I think certainly one could construe it that way for sure. I think what they attempted to articulate, which I think was their focus, was as a higher educational, more focused, higher level expectation from achievement standpoint. That is their interpretation of how that meets the policy, which was cited correctly there, it was the prior, when they began that process, my understanding is they used before it was migrated to the Neola templates and our new conversion numbering system. But yes, the understanding that basically on the work that they're doing to try to say that it is that specialized focus is the for example was the vocational, but in their mind it was this very rigorous attempt to really drive the rigor and the academic piece was why they wanted that particular focus of the academy, not like a arts academy, not but academic being more of that focal point. So enrichment within the art, like really that applied, getting into that academic side of it. But again, I think it's a valid point to raise that it is, I think it's important to voice that, because I do think that someone could look at it and say, is that really meeting the letter of the policy? But that is what that was the intention, I believe. And correct me if I'm wrong, Regional
That's correct.
Superintendent there.
Yeah, and I hear that intention, but I also believe that every single one of our schools should be academically focused. So to claim that an academic focus or academic excellence makes it into an academy, we should name every one of our schools an academy. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Other comments? May I make my comment then? I was, actually, what Ms. Jordan said is, with seeing Dr. Gibson up there, that was kind of going through the thing with myself with the academy part. I mean, I'm also, supportive if, that's what the stakeholders over in that school are interested. And the only thing I would ask for, as long as the board doesn't object, could we perhaps get, for after the meeting future, a little bit more about, like Ms. Trent had talked about, the kind of the definitions and the background of what the academy is or what academy would be. So. And then maybe we can follow up in one-on-ones with that.
Yes.
Or in future discussions. So.
Absolutely.
Anybody else? Okay. Are we ready, Mr. Superintendent?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Trent. Now we're going to move on to Dr. Gibson for Fort Myers Middle Academy school name change proposal. Welcome.
Thank you, and good afternoon, board members, Superintendent Dr. Savage and Mr. Bruno. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to have some time with you this afternoon in reference to the name change of Fort Myers Middle Academy to the options that would be available that I will show you later. Fort Myers Middle started as Fort Myers Junior High in 1955. It was changed to Fort Myers Middle School in 1974, and in 1996, it was also changed to Fort Myers Middle Academy. That's just the historical purposes of it. The cause for the proposal, School Board Policy 9.10, school name. It's circumstances that make an existing name for a school less appropriate or less desirable. And I can go into that, but the rationale is Fort Myers Middle Academy, Fort Myers Academy versus Fort Myers Middle Academy. There's a distinct name confusion. It also impacts my hiring, and it also impacts my school choice. And this is going back to the Fort Myers Academy that's no longer attached to the School District Elite Academy, but it's still there. And if you're not doing enough research when you research my school, which my parents do and which also my potential applicants do, if you type in Fort Myers Academy, then you're going to be linked to the Department of Juvenile Justice. And that alone is discouraging not just my parents, but it's also discouraging potential teachers who want to come to my school. And that's one of the forefronts. And we experienced that even sometimes with the district making that mistake when it was attached. I got a phone call and it's like, I don't have that teacher, wrong school. So that's some of the reasons or rationales for the change. Academy was adopted with programming in alignment with the 21st Century Grant, but that grant has since expired, and we do not have any of those academies at the school currently. The name change process, school-based committee was identified, electronic survey was distributed to all of our stakeholders. We're at that point where results shared at the board briefing for October 8th, but that changed due to hurricanes and things of that nature. The final ranking distributed, the ranking, a board briefing for November 6th, and hopefully the vote for the name to be changed. We did have a committee established representing some of our stakeholders from United Way, through Fort Myers Middle School parents, our parent involvement, some of our teachers, and Elite Health and Elite DNA was a part of some of our committee members that were a part of the conversation. And we met with those individuals, and the committee convened on September 3rd of this year. We distributed the survey on the 6th of September. We were able to provide results and review them with the committee on the 20th, and then now we're providing the information to the board today. The stakeholders, when we have 287 responses from students, former students, parent guardians, faculty, staff, volunteers, community members, former students and parents, and of course you have that one that says, I went here for middle school. I don't know what the rest of that part is, but they went here, that's what they wanted to type in. And so some of the suggestions, and I want you to please excuse some of the font differential, but we took it exactly from what they typed in reference to the response. And so we have Fort Myers Middle Academy, Fort Myers Middle School, Fort Myers Candy Academy, Travis Taylor Middle School, Fort Myers Middle's Dolphins, Fort Myers Middle School, Martin Luther King Middle, and a Ripple Academy. And with 57.4%, Fort Myers Middle School was the most popular name change based on the 296 responses that we were able to receive. Superintendent comments and board discussion.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, for acknowledging. So thank you, Dr. Gibson, as well. And again, this represents the opposite piece of, they're actually trying to move away from academy. And thank you for sharing the history of how that can create confusion when there is a specialized area that actually is, run through the Department of Juvenile Justice, and that gets conflated with this piece, and that does create issues. Obviously, for school, we love to really support. They've been the subject of numerous magnet grants, lots of investment. We certainly want to set Fort Myers up for significant success as the future. We recognize those challenges. Not only that, but one of the other things that often gets confused when we hear from the state is confusion with North Fort Myers Middle Academy as well, even though they just missed the north. And so that's been another confusion at times between those sites, but not the particular subject of interest that Dr. Gibson mentioned today, but just we've had it at our central office. We've had those challenges as well. So we stand ready to answer board member questions related to this particular presentation.
Questions, comments, board? Ms. Patrica, then Ms. Jordan.
Sorry, I'm talking a lot in my last meeting. If I may, through the chair, would this name change get rid of the confusion that has been occurring?
I still don't believe so.
You do?
We've already, for me, be honest with you, I've already transitioned that because it was such confusion. So when I'm speaking to potential candidates for instructional positions, I make sure that they go in and look for Fort Myers Middle Academy and give them the exact link to my school so that they can be able to distinguish between the two. It was very disheartening when you have potential candidates and then all of a sudden they don't give you the real rationale. They just say it's just not the school for me, but at one point in time you are all in, and then you go and do your research, which I think you rightfully should be able to do, and then all of a sudden you get a change of heart. And it's tough to staff my school, and we put in a lot of work when we speak to our potential candidates. We walk them around. It's not just the interview. We want them to feel the real culture and see them. We like to have interviews during the day so they can see the walk in the paths of our school, so they can make an informed decision. Because when you get in there, you got to roll your sleeves up and get to work. And they walk out all in. I can't wait. I'm doing it, and then they continue to do the research, and then it's like, no, that's not it. But the most glaring was when I got the call from the district, and they were wrong about calling me. And then I knew that was a part of the concerning issue.
Okay, thank you. That's it, thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Jordan?
Well, I'm all in. I did not go there, but my kids did, just saying. But Fort Myers Middle, I think that Fort Myers Middle is they have always called it that. Even though the academy was added on or whatever was added, it has always been known as Fort Myers Middle School because it was the ripple to the wave. So as far as history is concerned, I think this is a great opportunity to have that history of the school. And thank you for that.
And we're still working on the ripple to the wave. We have volunteers from Fort Myers High School. Their crayon program comes over and do tutoring during the day to our math students. And that's something Mr. Engelhardt and I kind of collaborated together, and then we still work together with Fort Myers High School on a regular basis.
Anybody else? Mr. Persons and then Isabella after that.
As the most famous alumni of that school, sitting on this board right now. Not ever.
Be careful, because I'm getting ready to start an alumni association. I'm going to call you on it.
I guess we can't go back to Fort Myers Junior High, but which it was when I went there. It was a little different grade structure. I think it was 7th, 8th, and 9th at that time. But yeah, Fort Myers Middle. My son went there, and that's when it was Fort Myers Middle, and that's what I've sort of always have called it, even when they added the academy myself. So yeah, I think that's an excellent choice.
Mr. Persons, Isabella?
Okay. I just wanted to mention, as just from the student point of view, I've never heard it called Fort Myers Middle Academy. Like, everyone just kind of always calls it Fort Myers Middle. So I do think, like everyone else was saying, like, it will be an easier transition. And then I also just wanted to bring up the point, as our society is expanding, a lot of our students have parents who English is not their primary language. So it's already kind of difficult to learn about the school. And if it has like one letter, one phrase that like makes it different from others, like you said, like you can get student attendance like drop because parents are like, oh, this is a Success Academy, like I'm not going to send my child here. But it's just because like if you don't put all the wording in, you may not get the exact school. So I think by altering it to where it makes it a little bit more unique than the others will definitely provide a better area for parents.
Good question. Good response.
Thank you, Isabella, for your question and feedback. We appreciate hearing it from, student level. It means a lot. So, Ms. Giovanelli?
And my daughter went there too, and it was Fort Myers Middle School. So yes, I get that. So I'm with you there. I find it interesting that you've got one school that wants the academy and one school that wants to get away from the word academy. I think that's kind of interesting. And then when I thought about it, there's the Success Academy, and that's usually not the school that students want to go to. They are told to. So I think we might want to think about this, the Bayshore Academy, making sure that that's going to be the best thing for Bayshore. I hate to throw a wrench in it, but I feel like Ms. Patrica brought up some really valid points, and so did Ms. Jordan regarding, what that academy is, because people do expect it to be a distinct thing that they're going to go there for. And I don't know, I'm a little concerned with one school wanting it and one wanting to get away from it, that word. So, thank you.
Mr. Persons?
I think part of the problem with the Bayshore is that we really don't have a designation for K-8. The other K-8 is the North Fort Myers Academy of the Arts, and then there's the Alva School, which is a K-8. If there really isn't an academy there, my choice would be to go to the Bayshore School. I think that was that the number 2 choice, or?
Actually, the number 2 was Bayshore, because just like Fort Myers Middle, a lot of times people call Fort Myers Middle, they just say Bayshore. So actually, the second choice was Bayshore, and I believe that the principal would be totally fine with that, because that's actually on their sign. It just says Bayshore. So
I see it every morning.
Yes, but that is what the survey results came back with, so that's why we were sharing. That was the first choice. However, if that second choice was Bayshore.
Okay.
Anybody else? Go ahead, Isabella.
Sorry, Just what she mentioned before reminded me. So when you mentioned that it was going to be Bayshore Academy, immediately what popped in my head was Success Academy, just because that is what like my principal like tells us like the kids who misbehave. It's like you don't want to go to Success Academy. So it's like having the word academy with no follow-up on it is just kind of like it has like a negative connotation, and you don't really want to bring that to a school that like is going to provide great resources for the kids. So it's just something to think about.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Oh, okay.
Great answer. Good job. Thank you. I'm going to go off of Miss Dr. Gibson's.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, following up on some of it before, and I'd asked the superintendent this, maybe we can get, and that's why I asked a little bit more on the definitions of academy. I said maybe we can follow up on that, and that might help out a little bit moving forward, so.
Yes, Chairman, we'll be happy in the next one-on-one prior to, because obviously for you all, that's why we have this, is the exact intended conversation, that we want the board to engage, analyze the policy against it. Are there issues? And we've noticed that those are some. We've also talked about some unintended consequences potentially. It's all feedback for folks to hear and evaluate, so that as we bring forward recommendations, we'll have recommendations at the next meeting. However, the board is also free to make adjustments. Ultimately, that's your decision, and we take your direction. I have heard lots of great feedback that we will be conveying back to that school community as well. So thank you for the feedback today. If you think of additional items, please bring that to us. We'll be happy to take that back, but all good discussion today.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Savage. Thank you, Dr. Gibson. Appreciate it. I know we have Mr. Persons on record about your alumni association, so make sure to follow up with that, please. Thanks. Okay. Moving on to item number 6 will be the plan for student enrollment 2025-2026. That will be a briefing and first reading, and that will be presented by Ms. Ralph.
Good afternoon, board members. Nice to meet you. Nice to see you today. I'm so happy that I left Bayshore just as Bayshore in my presentation. So I didn't put elementary. So hopefully we won't have to make any changes. So I'm excited to be here today to provide you an update on our plan for student enrollment for the 2025-2026 school year. I think you were provided copies of the plan with the edits, and then the final copy, which was probably much easier for you to read, along with an executive summary which kind of summarized everything for you. Today, we will be going through the actual student enrollment plan, any changes that we're making. But I will tell you in advance, for the past 2 years, we've made significant changes with our proximity plans for the elementary schools and for the middle schools. So we have a lot less changes this year for this upcoming year. I'm sure parents, along with everyone else, will be very happy to hear that information. And I'm not used to doing this without a helper. So let's start in the South Zone. We have 2 changes at the South Zone, and they both involve Dunbar High School. Dunbar will be ranked as in subzone 1, and also it will be ranked in subzone 2. This is not really a big change because in prior years we've been able to rank Dunbar High School in those zones, in fact all of the South Zones, but it was an attractor school, which with that information, I think that's changed over the years when we've used that term. So we wanted to get away from that because each of our schools, especially at the high school level, have many programs they offer and they get associated with those programs. So we wanted to just include the ranking. So Dunbar will be required to be ranked in subzone 1 and also subzone 2. Any families that live all the way in subzone 3, of course, could enroll in Dunbar via a waiver, or if they live in the island schools area, in those areas, they can of course rank Dunbar and submit it via a waiver. Transportation would not be provided if it was a waiver though, okay? If we drive on over to the West Zone, we see just a couple changes in the West Zone. I'm very excited to say that Island Coast High School this year will have the FGCU collegiate program. That will allow us to have that program available in each of our zones for our high schools. In the past, we had it at Bonita Springs High School and also at Gateway High School, and we did not have one in the West Zone. So thank you, Mr. Simmons, for making that happen, and we look forward to that process. Also, Island Coast High School will be a school that is a school choice for Subzone 3 in the West Zone. We've had it in Subzone 3 as a required ranking. Then it was taken out a few years ago. It's been out for maybe 2-3 years maybe, but we're going to put it back in. It is also an attractor school in Subzone 3 that parents could choose to rank, but we're going to make it where they're going to have to rank it at this level for this upcoming school year. And then if we go on to the East Zone, you see a few changes here. There's my Bayshore without the elementary after it. So Bayshore will have grade 7 for the 25-26 school year. Bayshore will also be available for the middle school zone CC for 6th grade and 7th grade. How we're going to do that is we will wait till after all of the current Bayshore 5th graders and 6th graders are pre-placed for this upcoming school year, and then the seats that are available, that are left to be filled, we will be able to set that capacity, and then we'll be able to let some students in subzone CC for middle school be able to select Bayshore. Island Coast High School will be a school that will rank in East Subzone 1. It has also always been an attractor there to rank, but now we're going to make it a requirement. Dunbar High School and East Lee County High School follow the same process. Dunbar High School was available for students that reside in East Subzone 3 to rank as an attractor school. We're going to get away from that because of the start time, the bell time, the bus schedule is very, very early for those students. So they can still go to East Lee if they live there, but we want to make sure that they submit a waiver for it. The same thing for East Lee County High School. If I reside in Subzone 1, I could have selected East Lee, and we'll do the same thing. They can still select it, but they would do it via waiver. We had students that were getting those schools as rankings, and they were getting on the bus at 4:45, 4:50 in the morning. I hope you weren't. You're shaking your head. Also, the next slide just is a little clarification. We tried this past school year to put Fort Myers Beach, the Sanibel School, and Pine Island School available for every student in all of the elementary subzones, and of course Sanibel in the middle school subzone. Believe it or not, with all of the communication that was provided, the notation on both the paper form and in focus, parents were still confused. Many of them ranked the school because it was in ABC order, so they got that school. They lived in the East Zone. They didn't get transportation. The lottery had already run, so they did not get their first choice, obviously, for schools in their zone. So what we're going to do is we've taken those schools out of the rankings in the different little zones, but we put a notation at the top of the paper application, and also it will be at the top of their individual proximity zone application that they will see in focus, telling the parents that they can select the school. There will be no district transportation provided. All they have to do is email us, and we will put those students right in those schools. But it caused, although it was a great intention on our part to make it available, it caused a lot of confusion for families. Our choice applications, well, first let me start with what's going on right now. We are enrolling our upcoming kindergarten class right now, and any of our students that are in charter schools or pre-K going into our district schools for next year, we're pre-registering or enrolling them right now or re-enrolling them, so that they will be ready for the choice applications that will open on January the 21st and run through February the 28th. That will be the time that our parents will be able to select their schools, enter their rankings. We'll pre-place siblings as we've always done, or we've done in the past 2 to 3 years, because we want to make sure our families are together. They can submit those applications online, or of course they can come to our office and use our queue list system to make an appointment or join the line and be a walk-in. We're providing as much communication as we know to provide families. We have updated our website. I do want to point that out right now. We have worked really hard to make it more reader-friendly. We have sent communications via the school messenger and also through email from the communications department here at the School District of Lee County. We have sent information to all of our media outlets and on social media telling them what's going on. We also have partnered with the charter office by sending information to the charter schools. This is what you need to be doing right now, so you'll be ready in January. And those would be for our schools that just have elementary or they have elementary and middle. We've also communicated with Dr. Quisenberry in the Early Childhood Center, and she is working with the Southwest Florida Early Learning Coalition to get communication out to all of our private early learning programs or daycares in Lee County, which is a big task, but letting those parents know. Many of our parents think that we know that they have a child at the Grace Community School, for an example. We don't know that child's there, and they have to register with us before they get a school. Parents ask us every year, but I was going to start kindergarten, but we didn't know that. So we're trying any possible way that we can get communication out. And again, we also submitted information to each of our schools. We've got posters in multiple languages at the schools in the office area, and it's in the departmental weekly updates to let them know what's going on. I'll be happy to entertain any questions you have, but before we do and have board member discussion, I do want to tell you that Dr. Edie sent me some things from members of the EDAC committee where they had reviewed the plan. I'm going through their suggestions, and if there are any changes, I'll be sure and provide that to you, okay? But I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Ms. Ralph, do you have anything, Dr. Savage, before we go?
I don't at this time, but we are ready for any questions you all may have.
Board members, comments, questions? Ms. Giovanelli, followed by Ms. Jordan.
So I have a couple questions. Dr. Ralph, I just actually had someone ask me about pre-K or early learning in the West Zone. Do we have any schools over there that like that we have at James Stevens, and then the new one at out east at, I can't think of that school, but that we just opened.
Weaver.
G. Weaver, thank you.
You're welcome. I'm not aware that we have that big of an organization or a school site that has that many seats available. I do know that every seat that we have, I'm sure that it could probably be filled, but our schools are very full now, so we want to make sure that we're serving all those needs. But I'll be happy to provide information to Dr. Savage for which schools have those programs and what programs are available.
Thank you. So that would be a question for the superintendent. Are we going to be looking at opening up one of those? And I know that you're counting your days, so this may not be a question you can answer now, so maybe later. Of looking into one in the West Zone, like we have, because now we have one at, James Stevens, and then we have one out east. I mean, I think the West Zone, obviously the need is there. So I was just curious if we're looking at opening up. I don't think we've had that conversation. That's why.
It's a great question. So historically, this was an area, so this actually goes back to when Dr. Atkins was superintendent. One of the big five, one of the big initiatives was to continue to boost pre-K enrollment. It was done more as a strategy to really provide more services and options to our community to ensure that our students had a higher rate of kindergarten readiness. And some of that, of course, occurs naturally through folks who utilize the VPK, the Head Start, and so forth. And then, of course, in our programming, for students who qualify for exceptional services, we have them deployed. And that constitutes, so when Ms. Ralph was talking about the different schools, a lot of that is really delivered through ESC programming that's currently deployed in those schools, and we can definitely get you those individual school sites. That said, when you talk about a particular pre-K center where it's all exclusively pre-K, it's expanded number of classrooms, G. Weaver HIPS was really the culmination of one of those projects, as was James Stevens. Those were a targeted attempt to try to add 200 seats a year. That was kind of the goal under the Big Five. For our newer board members, that preceded your time, but for the existing seated board members that were here, that was a huge lift to try to keep adding physical capacity to do that. The areas we targeted with that expansion was in the areas that are significantly underserved. The East Zone being one of those, James Stevens being another one, exactly areas where there were essentially deserts of early learning providers, where there weren't safe environments to do so, or there just was a lack of offerings in those areas. So those were considered areas, whereas Cape Coral represented an area that had more offerings that were already available. The VPK vouchers, for example, can be issued through private providers and so forth. It's not just offered through our school district. It can be done through a lot of different other providers, and so any of those different areas Cape Coral was not identified at that time, but we also actually built some of that into some of our school builds at the time. We were trying to get pre-K into, when we had our K-8s, you saw that pre-K, setting aside additional seats for that. Since the challenge, of course, as you've noticed from a capital budget standpoint, is things have gotten more expensive and we're having to make very difficult decisions. So the challenge with pre-K, and why Cape Coral, why I wanted to further example this, was that Cape Coral was considered a potential location where we could potentially offset fee-based, which is how a lot of different providers allow to provide pre-K services, is that they offer to different communities that have the ability, they can charge tuition and so forth to offset some of those full-day programming the VPK voucher doesn't provide. So that's where Cape Coral was starting to be targeted, but as obviously we've seen a significant change since the pandemic, that all was prior to COVID. Post-pandemic, and our capital situation has changed dramatically from where it was, but we'd be happy to bring back some of that information to private board member one-to-ones, just so you have kind of more of a sense of what's kind of the current lay of land in terms of early learning. But I know a lot of our seated board members also probably remember a lot more of those conversations as we've analyzed that as well. So that's my response to that.
Thank you. And so this is a couple questions for Dr. Ralph. What are the hours for student enrollment? What are the hours that your office runs?
So the staff arrive at 8 o'clock and they stay until 4. We open the doors for our families at 9, and the last appointment through QLIS is at 3:30. Of course, when we get busy, we open the doors much earlier and we stay later.
Right. So are y'all still taking lunch all at the same time and everything?
No, ma'am, we haven't done that for probably at least 2 years now.
Okay, great. I didn't realize that. Have we ever thought about, because parents do work, is there any way that we could do up until, I don't know, yeah, this would be a scheduling, but maybe a Saturday, like a early morning, to allow opportunity for parents to come that work, 5 days a week, or, allow a Saturday work schedule for people to come in and register those students, that you're missing, kind of.
So many of our parents are using our online system. I will tell you that it is greatly improved. We are open some Saturdays prior to school starting when it gets really busy,
Right.
But during the regular school year with a limited number of staff, without putting everyone at overtime, I don't think that's something the district would be in support of all the time either. But that's an option. I do understand the need of families. I will say parents use our online system 24 hours a day.
Gotcha. Well, and I was thinking like they would get a day off during the week and then wouldn't have to work a Saturday or something like that, not really overtime. But I was just, especially during the busy time, I hear that's the struggle is the timing to get here. For 3 o'clock or 3:30 is really tough for people that work 5 to 6 o'clock at night, but in the evening. But all right, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Ms. Jordan.
Mine's just 2 quick questions. The magnet program for Island Coast, I saw the presentation and everything, which I think is phenomenal, but that will provide, for that program, transportation will be provided, correct? I just want to make sure, clarification on that one. And then when we say East Zone for Island Coast, it sounds like they're coming from Lehigh. That's East Zone 1?
So East...
that's North Fort Myers, right?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted that to be, because when I heard East Zone, if someone else is here in East, they're thinking, you're going to take someone from Lehigh all the way to Cape Coral. So I just wanted to make sure that was...
Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you. I appreciate all you do. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else before we move on? Okay. Oh, was there somebody down there? Okay, sorry. Thank you, Ms. Ralph. Okay, we're going to move on to item number 7, which is policy review with Attorney Debris Bruno, whenever you get seated on the other side. you're ready, Attorney Bruno.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. These policies were actually already briefed by the board, went to first reading on September 17th, and they were actually scheduled to go to public hearing on the 8th, that action meeting, but we were not able to do that due to Hurricane Milton, so we have to start the process over. Are there any questions?
Anybody have any questions on these policies? Is that a hand, Ms. Jordan?
Yes,
Yeah.
for this, the public participation at board meetings, when we've changed that now, where public comments will be able to be at our workshops.
Yes.
For us to ask, like at our action meetings, the public comes in and they can speak before. Now we're asking them to come and sit for 3 hours to speak to us after, and then directly after that, we have an action meeting. So I was just curious about, would that be good for us to change that, to have them speak first?
Completely to the will of the board. Basically, since the board doesn't have briefings anymore, this policy just adopts the same practice that we had for briefings where public comment was at the end of the briefing.
Correct. That's why I'm bringing it up now. Thank you.
Okay. Any board member thoughts, questions? Ms. Patrica?
I don't think it's a policy issue because the policy says at the designated time for public comment. So I think that's a discussion for the new board. When do you want to take public comment? Right? During your protocols, maybe? Protocol discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Patrica.
I agree with Ms. Patrica. It's why I really didn't say anything. I figured, I just assumed it's something that the new board should converse about along with the superintendent. But you make a great point, Ms. Jordan, about having people sit through a 3-hour workshop, then have a conversation, possibly in an hour, come back and have another opportunity to speak. So I think it's a valid point. I just think maybe we should have that discussion in the next board meeting. That's all.
Ms. Patrica?
And then another thing on this subject has nothing to do with the policy is, as much as I love when Mr. Fisher runs a meeting, I feel like our vice chair has been cut out of running meetings. So perhaps the new board could have a discussion about who takes over workshops going forward. Those are my comments. Thank you.
That's funny you say that, and I can say it now. I've actually talked to Dr. Savage, and we've been dealing with some transition stuff. I'm going to make a suggestion to the new board that the vice chair will handle the workshops. This was just based on our current board protocol. That's why we kept it like that. But anybody else? Oh, Dr. Savage.
Just on this topic, just obviously you'll have a chance to talk about it, but there are pros and cons to doing the comment at the beginning or the end. One of the advantages of doing it at the end during a work session of the board is that while public speakers are only allowed to speak on the content of the meeting, they also would have the ability to hear board discussions. So sometimes they'd have the ability after the fact to have heard that discussion. This is really when board members are in depth with their examination of issues, which you aren't necessarily doing to that extent at the action meeting. They're just different meetings for that purpose. So the opportunity that you have, that was probably why you might see it at the end, is so that they can hear that discussion. They can add potentially color in the comment that's on that item, but also on the board discussion. The board members still do have a closing comment where they'd have the ability then to have additional discussion if they wanted to do that. That said, there is no, as our attorney mentioned, there is really no one right way to do it. There's probably just pros and cons to those different functions of how to do that. But it definitely does ask then the public constituent person, if they only came to share their opinion or their thought, they would very well be sitting there for quite a long meeting. If their intent was to sit and listen to the meeting and to provide comment on the substantive discussion that is planned for a work session, then they would want to hear all that discussion because it would inform their comment potentially. So just different pros and cons to that contemplation for you.
Thank you. And if I may add something, Mr. Chairman, the prior policy did actually have a specific time, but there was an incident that had occurred where the board wanted to hear what the individual said prior to the discussion. So that's why we changed the language and gave it some flexibility.
I think that brings up a great point when the new board assembles to go through that in a workshop, perhaps. So, With any of the other policies, anyone have any comments, questions, or concerns? Seeing none, do we have any objection to moving forward with these policies to a second reading? Attorney Bruno, do you have your direction?
I do, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up will be item number 8, agenda review with Dr. Savage.
Thank you, Chairman. I did not receive any questions for the agenda, but stand ready to answer any questions the board may have.
Okay. Ms. Langford Fleming?
Yes, and I sort of spoke with Dr. Savage about this in a one-on-one regarding the new end schedule. I'm sorry, I didn't really, this is really just a point I wanted to ask and make sure that the public and definitely our staff understood. If we could just have if you could just summarize that quick discussion that we had about the administrative schedule, and then those serving that are not necessarily our APs and our principals, but other administrators in the building and their responsibilities. Would you mind touching on that?
I'm happy to do it. And again, this is anytime you're adopting a salary schedule, it's certainly going to be something that there will be lots of discussion about. And so I wanted to make sure I highlighted, this even as late as this week, earlier this morning, we sent some clarification to our administrative groups. It's not really about the salary schedule per se. That aspect hasn't changed at all, but it's really about then how it's applied to those individual employee groups. Obviously for TALC and SPALC, they go through bargaining there, whereas for our end schedule and for our admin, they don't have that. And so for us, it's really that good faith back and forth work of really trying to understand what are the issues, what are the challenges that come with that. And a lot of it is people don't necessarily understand until they understand how it's going to impact them individually. So I just kind of want to use this to highlight a lot of this content we already covered with the board members in our public briefings. But I think when you have employee groups that are all notified, they go through a meeting, they hear how it's going to impact them, and they get a direct communication that says, and here's what you're actually going to make, well, then it starts to address lots of other questions for them that we then work through. So the specific issue that we were talking about that I wanted to kind of make sure I highlighted was really to do with school-based administration. So we have 3 school-based administrative positions that are in play that you'll see, and it's on that piece that I want to give voice to. First is your athletic directors. The second group is your assistant principals, and then the third is your principals. So without going too deep into it beyond what's already been presented to the board in the public briefings, what we found when we did the Evergreen analysis and their market analysis was a big part of that is where they're trying to then migrate and place positions onto a new salary schedule. So you have your exiting, similar to when you did the policy adoption. You have your old policies, you sunset those, and you adopt a new one. So everyone has to be migrated over. In that migration, the attempt through the Evergreen analysis was to properly place them to where the market analysis says they should be, based on that analysis that Evergreen did of a job study where they looked at every element of those job functions and said, okay, based on what you're doing and comparing other districts and what they call those positions, this is a proper pay grade to place those positions. So presently, we look at our our athletic directors and assistant principals as equivalent. Through the Evergreen analysis, what they said was the athletic director job and the assistant principal job are not the same. Athletic directors, while they have a significant level of responsibility in supervising athletics and the coaching, supporting a lot of the supplemental positions, and having lots of hours that they have to spend investing in that piece. I myself was a former athletic director. I've been coaching sports. It's an incredibly demanding job, absolutely. But when they compared that to an assistant principal job, what they found was they were fundamentally different jobs. Assistant principals may have to hire, fire, potentially discipline permanent staff. They have to do instructional. They have inspect. They are accountable for classroom instruction, evaluating teachers, providing all that additional work that athletic directors don't have. They're working with, in some cases, casual employees, supplemental employees. They're not having to do those same types of activities that the other administrators. However, both are administration, just different roles and functions. When Evergreen did their analysis, they placed them in different pay grades. So as you migrate 2 groups that are in this equivalent grade to new, where they're in different grades, what does that mean for the employee groups? So for athletic directors in particular, when they migrated over, they actually go from where almost all of our other positions administratively are now in the bottom third of the new pay grade. The pay grades, by virtue of kind of how they're designed, expanded. So now those pay grades are higher. And a lot of that work in phase 2, as we mentioned, is differentiating. if you're both principals. But if one principal's at a school that's maybe a high school and a turnaround school, should that be higher on the grade than a small elementary school that it maybe has, and it doesn't have those same challenges? And so that grade, by virtue of that, it's significantly expanded. Well, so functionally, what happened when athletic directors moved over to that was they moved to the median of that new grade. But that grade was, of course, lower than what the assistant principal was. And so that's kind of in net effect of what it did, is they were not harmed. No one loses money. No one actually goes down. Everyone actually, is at minimum is maintained. And then for those employees that didn't get a increase, they weren't having to be brought up at all, they receive a 3% bonus. So they get that. It's non-recurring. That allows them to get that piece, but all of them are at the mid of that range, which is very different from the other administrators that are all really in the bottom of that range. And so while people would like to see more recurring dollars, that's not really what the market analysis said based on what Evergreen did. By contrast, assistant principals at the school-based level and the principals were found to be obviously, we talked about some of the observed equity issues that we had of really didn't conform to logical patterns. Those things have all been fixed through this migration. Everyone's put towards again, it's a step one, very basic. They all migrate to the bottom of this range, but that entire bottom really comes up significantly with your school-based administrators for those folks, because what we found was we were significantly off market for our school-based administrative side, which now will be consistent. So essentially, you have an equivalence now of directors and principals that are now an equivalent level of pay, and you have assistant principals and assistant directors that are now an equivalent level of pay. And there was a lot of that correction to try to get that based on that years. They're still at the bottom third of that range, but that nets a significant increase. And so if they were comparing, if I'm an athletic director comparing to the assistant principal, I might see that it's not quite the same. And that is functionally why that occurred. It's all based on the analysis. I hope that provides a little bit of clarity. I know it's beyond. Dr. Desamore did a much better job than I did, but that's my attempt to try to add it because once the rubber meets the road is really where people all of a sudden have additional questions, and we don't blame them. That's why we want to talk about them.
Thank you. And I knew you could explain it more eloquently than I could, so I appreciate you taking the time to break that down. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Anybody else for any questions for agenda review tonight? Okay. Moving on, item 9 will be public comment. Attorney Bruno, please address the item of public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. School board policy provides the opportunity at this point in the meeting to address the board concerning any matter on this meeting's agenda. If you completed a public comment card, please provide it to the staff. Public comment will be held at the podium in the center aisle in the front. Please be advised that the board will not respond during public comment to remarks made by speakers. However, at the conclusion of public comment, the chair, superintendent, or board attorney may respond if deemed necessary. Abusive language, defined as swearing, use of profanity, or name-calling, is prohibited. Speakers who fail to follow proper decorum in the chambers will be ruled out of order. Any speaker continuing with such remarks will be required to relinquish the microphone per Board Policy 0169.1 and may be removed from the chambers, and there will be one warning. Per Board Policy 0169.1, the time per speaker is 3 minutes if there are 20 speakers or less. You'll find a countdown on the big screens in the front of the room. Once your time has elapsed, the microphone will automatically shut off. Please state your name when you approach. Mr. Chairman, there is one individual that would like to address the board.
Okay, and workshop public comment is based on the items on the agenda. Please make sure you've completed a public comment card if you intend to provide public comment. This card is public identifying those who speak and providing contact information to staff for follow-up. The cards are located with the staff. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address the board for public comment that has not filled out a card? Please raise your hand. Okay. Seeing none at this moment, Attorney Bruno, please proceed with public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Will Christy DiVigili please come forward?
Good afternoon, Christy DiVigili. I have a SAC meeting to go to this evening, so I can't be at the board meeting later. So hopefully you're not going to interrupt me, because I don't know if this had to do with anything on today's agenda, but it has to do with just everything that you guys talked about anyway today. So today marks the end of an era as we close the door on the terms of 2 school board members whose leadership has left many in our community deeply disappointed. Both came into office with promises of transparency, accountability, and service to our students and their families. But sadly, throughout your tenure, we have witnessed nearly the opposite in every area. Under your oversight, transparency was often sacrificed for self-interest. From unfulfilled promises to lack of public engagement, you both chose to benefit from backroom deals rather than putting students' welfare first. Your consistently dismissive approaches to community concerns and alignment with policies that have sidelined parents' voices sent a clear message to all of us, and that your priorities do not align with the families of Lee County. Both of you leave a legacy marked by policies that have hurt our children, trampled over parental rights, and have cost taxpayers millions of dollars. Policies that are rooted in corporate gain rather than what's best for our kids. Our community deserves leadership that puts our kids first and fiscal transparency at the forefront, not board members who bend to personal interests and corporate ties. Let this be a message to future leaders. We, the parents, will hold every one of you accountable for truth and integrity in your duties. We will no longer accept anything less than a school board that puts students and families first. To the outgoing board members, as your tenure ends, may this experience serve as a reminder that Lee County parents do care about their kids and their education, and we're willing to do whatever it takes to ensure that they have the very best people governing our schools from now on. Thank you and have a great day, guys.
That concludes public comment.
Thank you, Attorney Debris Bruno. We're going to move on to item 10, good of the order, and other business and board comment. So I promised I will not forget this either. We'll go to Isabella first. So.
Thank you. I would just like to start by saying thank you to the board and to my principal, Mr. Burnside, for giving me this opportunity. Like, it's really amazing to see. I'm taught in my schools and I participate in multiple activities that involve just organized debate and just kind of drawing a better conclusion for the better of the community, like through that. So it's amazing to see it in a really professional environment. Excuse me. I've also been taught throughout my entire educational career to always seek out like the why behind what I do, like to not just blindly accept anything. So just having these meetings, especially broadcasted to the public, is just like amazing to see like, okay, this decision is made because of this. And like, honestly, when we were talking about the, I believe it was the demolition of one school and we're gonna build a new one, a lot of times in society we see things like movies that show like, okay, these kids that have to stand up for their school and like don't let the evil bad guys take it down. But really, like, it is for the benefit of all to build the new school. It is to, like, it provides more seats and more education for our community. So just like sharing that with the community is really, really great. And I greatly appreciate this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabella. We're going to keep going down the line if that's all right, Ms. Morgan.
Two brief comments. First of all, I want to congratulate the school district for two recent awards: the $2 million Workforce Development Capitalization Initiative grant from the state of Florida. This will allow for 4 new career programs and expend 10 current ones. For those who are in the community who are following this is Applied Robotics at Island Coast, a Solar Academy at Estero High, Environmental Water and Reclamation at Cypress Lake High, expansion of the veterinary academies at Gateway, Mariner, and South, and enhancing the agriculture programs at Bonita, Buckingham, and East Lee County and South Fort Myers High School. Also, the Outboard Marine Academy. And also, and this is really unusual, the school district was awarded a 3-year, $450,000 grant from the Sprouts Healthy Communities Foundation. The funding is the largest of its kind awarded to a public school district by the foundation. It will support the establishment and maintenance of school gardens, providing students with opportunities to cultivate fresh produce, learn about nutrition, and understand the importance of local food systems. This is, the Healthy Learning Collaborative has been working on this for a couple of years. We have we have school gardens in a number of our elementary, middle, and high. This will make certain that every school has the opportunity to have a garden for the students. And so, congratulations to the Healthy Learning Collaborative. I'm going to make some pretty lengthy comments this evening, so be prepared. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Morgan. Ms. Langford Fleming.
Isabella, you are outstanding. Thank you so much for coming and sharing. And this is why I love having our students at workshops, because this is where I feel like you really get to see the work being done. Tonight, we just say yes, no. So, and the great thing about action meetings is you do get to hear quite a bit of public comment, so we get to hear from our constituents. But you're such a well-spoken young lady, and I love your, I just love where your mind's at and being able to express your feelings so eloquently. So thank you for sharing your afternoon with us. Bright things ahead for you. I will most likely defer my time to two of our board members going out this evening because I want to give them that opportunity to share their thoughts for their experiences. But I'll have one more thing this evening, but I did want to say that I went to an amazing band experience. It was held at Fort Myers High School, and it was band competitions. I felt so bad because when I was there, I left, I came back. At one point it was so hot, and at the other point it was pouring. So, but they still participated. They marched in, one of the bands got superiors and did their entire performance in the pouring down rain. So, I mean, those are some tough kids, but I love our halftime shows, and those kids work so hard. I mean, they get up wee hours in the morning on Saturdays to practice their halftime show, and they get their 4 minutes of fame. So I just thought that was great. And it's, you know, it was a great activity. So that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Persons?
I want to start off with a question for Isabella. What instrument do you play?
So I play the oboe in the Southwest Florida Youth Orchestra, and I also can play the saxophone. So
That's awesome. Actually, I have nothing else. It's just curiosity. Thank you.
You sure, Mr. Persons? Okay. Ms. Jordan?
Okay, I just want, Isabella, thank you very much for being here. And I love when you said you seek out the why. I think that's so important because I'm always seeking that why out. That's why I always speak. So thank you for doing that. Also, and thank you, Ms. Morgan, for speaking about the Healthy Learning Collaborator, I can't even say the word. I was at Dunbar Middle. I stopped by there. They were doing a build out there at the school. And yes, they're going to be putting some more out there with that group of people and the kids being out there and just really participating and building. It was really nice. And the fact that they'll be eating that food. So it'll be healthy food for them. But I have the rest of the stuff that I'll just speak on later tonight. I just wanted to add those two things in. But thank you so much for being here, honey. Appreciate you. And I like your school.
Ms. Patrica?
Like Ms. Morgan, I have comments for tonight. Thank you for giving up a little bit of your time so I can make those. But I do have two things I wanted to talk about today. The first is it Isabella or Isabella?
Isabella.
Isabella. You seek your why. You are my why. And I think you are the why of most of the people who are sitting at this table. And I think it was Chair Fisher that kind of pushed the idea of having students at workshops instead of in the evening.
That was actually more Dr. Shaker. I want to give him credit for that.
Thank you.
But it's going to be part of an evolving process, so I want to make sure we give credit where credit's due for that. So,
Like
yes,
super meaningful contribution to the discussion and to the decision-making process. We've often talked about having the student voice be part of the decision-making process. This is how we do it. I wish we had done this 8 years ago. You are phenomenal, and go Tigers. The second thing I wanted to talk about, and it's something that's sort of weighed heavily on my mind since Milton, is our island schools. We saw some challenges discussed earlier today by Ms. Ralph regarding student assignment and our island schools. And it hit me really, really hard 2 weeks ago when we were in here, and I think somebody said something about either a principal and an assistant principal or two principals at Sanibel School. I forget what the staffing arrangement is there exactly, but that's two administrators in a school of approximately 220 students. And my kids went to Pinewoods, which has over 1,000 students, and there's two administrators in that school. I didn't think about that when we voted to reopen Fort Myers Beach Elementary. I didn't think about the cost-saving measures that we put in place there and how they should be extended to the other island schools. So I put that on the table for incoming board members and board members who will continue to consider as time goes forward. I will say, you know, I've done a lot of reflecting over the past couple weeks, and I do believe that reopening Fort Myers Beach Elementary is the biggest mistake I made sitting at this table. And I hate to say that because I feel like that community deserves a school, but I also feel like, I think it was 1.5 million. The operating expenses at that school are 1.5 million above the average operating expense for a school. I think that every school deserves that money as opposed to just 60-plus students. You know, I cannot believe that I'm sitting here saying I made an emotional decision because I pride myself on not being emotional in my decision-making, but I can't blame anything other than emotion on that decision. That and the inability to see that it would continue to occur. I really believe Fort Myers Beach and Ian was a 100-year storm type scenario, but since then, that island has flooded 5 times, and I know that the school has had 2 instances where we've had to do some remediation. So I lay that on the table for incoming board members and existing board members who are carrying on to consider as you go forward. Money's getting tighter. It's not getting, we're not getting more of it. We're getting more students, but we're not getting more money. So we're going to have to find ways to cut everywhere we can go. And I do regret continuing to put that much money into a school that only educates 60-plus kids, and putting those same measures into our other island schools, I think would serve every student across the district very well. That's it for now. I'll have more this evening, if I may, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Giovanelli?
To just to add to Ms. Patrica's point regarding the Fort Myers Beach School, we do have an agreement that was a 5-year agreement. What is the date on that? And I think that would be important just to have that thrown out there.
Yes.
I think what you're referring to is the next date of review where they're going to look at the enrollment. It's a agreement between for Fort Myers Beach, you're speaking of specifically, it's enrollment targets and so forth as they attempt to make those. It's November is the next convening of that, where they'll review the data and so forth. So that's this month that they'll be reviewing that data.
Okay, thank you. I think that's important because we did give them a timeline to help increase their capacity. And so, I mean, at this point, I think that we need to honor that. But I do think it's a hard conversation that we do need to have. And considering the recent floodings and so forth that they've had to experience again, and what they were wanting and willing to do after the storm. So I think that's all I'm going to say for now. I think that I will go to you.
Thank you. And I'll go over a couple things. Isabella, first off, thank you. And thank you for being so interactive. And one of the words that came up, and I've talked about before with students up here, and I was the word of the day with Dr. Shaker was active, not being passive. So that's one of the things that I would like to see going forward. There's also, you know, I had talked about having perhaps some student presentations, and that will be something I believe we'll discuss, obviously, the new board, but Ms. Patrica had indicated earlier in the year to make sure to, I don't remember the colloquial phrase, but, you know, keep on it kind of thing. So I am with that, and I will look forward to presenting some more of that to the new board as we go ahead. So wanted to, you know, take a couple things now with the understanding, and I was, you know, as Ms. Langford Fleming kind of said, and for Ms. Morgan and Ms. Patrica, so staff knows I would expect the meeting tonight will run a little bit longer, so we will have plenty of time. In regards to, so I want to give an update as well on the foundation, and the reason I want to give an update now is just for to go through. We have, I mentioned the strategic planning, so when I was on the committee part of that, Dr. Savage was on a community committee, I'll say that 3 times fast. I know Dr. Savage was on another committee, and one of the things that we'll be presenting next week, and I kind of wanted to relay, you know, better how to have, you know, basically the foundation, you know, better be involved in the community and, you know, understanding that stuff and be, you know, kind of, you know, better interaction and understanding. One of the things that a couple of us that the last FSBA conference, we went to, I believe it was Orange County had kind of a foundation update of how they do things up there. And one of the things I'm going to be presenting on behalf of my committee is relationship with realtors. On the board up in Orange County, their foundation is the head of their realtor sits on there. And what they do is they utilize every single realtor to essentially sell and support those schools. And I thought that was a fantastic idea, and that's something my committee is going to present to the foundation. So a lot of us have kind of talked about that, and I think Ms. Giovanelli, I think Mr. Persons, I don't know, was Ms. Jordan maybe in that? It was one of our FSBA classes, so talking about how to kind of work with your foundation overview. So I kind of wanted to give you just a little bit of update and feedback and how that class kind of inspired some stuff that we're going to be bringing forward. So I'm excited to see that and see what the executive committee of the foundation thinks about that. So, and the other thing I was thinking as we're going through so many things, and Mr. Person mentioned it, there's so many, just even these presentations, there's so many opportunities with our government relations, and I'm happy, obviously, we have Ms. Kempton aboard, but so many different things that we can utilize, even just with some of the buildings and the outreach and these, these different boards that change. And I think we have some real opportunities to really utilize that and be able to really do some great things here in Lee County. So that's all I have at the moment. I will turn it over to Attorney Bree Bruno.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Isabella, I was reading again all these accomplishments that you have with math and physics. I was horrible in physics, so I'm really impressed by that. And then your tutoring, and then tutoring sign language to children who have Down syndrome. I mean, this is just absolutely phenomenal. And what's really, really nice, what I picked up today with regards to your leadership, because you clearly are a leader and you're shining, is the fact that you have all of these adults here on this dais. Some of them are elected political officials and a superintendent of schools responsible for a massive organization, and you had no fear or qualm to sit there and ask tough questions and ask questions so you can learn. That is so impressive, and that's what you need to keep doing. That's how you're going to continue to grow and keep shining. So best of wishes to you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Dr. Savage.
Well, yes, I just wanted to, a couple things. I want to start with a question for Isabella. So you're on Dunbar, and you said you were on the math team. So I was curious, something we don't always talk about a lot here. Math team is a very unique thing. Can you explain, from your perspective, what is probably the best thing you really enjoy about the math team experience?
Thank you. That's a really good question. So I lead my the geometry math team at my school, and the biggest thing I teach is that math team is not about getting some plastic trophy that you're gonna throw away in 3 years when you have to go to college. Like it's not all about winning. It's more about growing and pushing yourself. Math team, often the kids who participate in math team are often top of their classes, straight A students. They're not used to failure. And something actually Mr. Savage has taught me a lot is that if you are the smartest person in a room, find another room. Because you have nowhere to go once you're out of 100%. That's what I tell my kids when I'm teaching them. I try to give them the hardest thing I can come up with and something they should score 30%, 15% on. And it's really hard to, when you're so used to getting 100% to suddenly be, quote unquote, failing. But the failing is how you grow. The failing is how you push yourself and get better. So I think that's just a message that just, overall needs to be shared, that, failure isn't something that should be negative or bad. It just means that now you can grow from it. So that's the most important thing for me.
And I promise I didn't give Isabella any prompting that I was going to ask that question, right? But I wanted to at least have that student voice kind of capture something that we don't talk about a lot, because we're looking at the entire system, and with 100,000 students, there's so many. But one of because it's a very small number of the overall students that participate, because it's such an ambitious standard. The math team takes some of your most high-achieving students in the school, and it's a very small percentage of students that even could qualify to even sit and fail one of these very, very difficult tests. But they compete against all the best of these students in all these schools, and then all across our state, in some cases our entire country. And then in the Microsoft side, when you talk about the computer-based, they're even competing against students worldwide. And so that's really, when we talk about being world-class and we think about those things, these are some of those specific opportunities of really enrichment in the academic space that I just want to give voice to. Whenever we have a student here, it's, we think math team just like any other interest, but it really is exposure to that world-class standard that we so often talk about, but don't always have evidence that we're actually engaging in that space. And Dunbar is one of those rare examples of a place where students students are pushing themselves. And what I also appreciate about that you gave voice to, Isabella, was just students learning to push themselves to that standard. It isn't a teacher necessarily alone, that teacher can eventually kind of bring them to that precipice. But if they can then themselves become challenging other students, what I've noticed at that group was just leadership among the students themselves. They become the ones building that next generation of high-achieving students. That's when you talk about a culture of high achievement that is occurring on those types of organizations. So thank you for that, Isabel. I also wanted to highlight that to kind of acknowledge something because of that. Two of our outgoing board members. We had an election yesterday, in case someone didn't realize. And it's a unique opportunity to acknowledge that we have two board members who, this is their last work session that we have, and that's Ms. Patrica and Ms. Morgan. These are two board members who historically, through my entire tenure, whether it's 8 years or 12 years, have constantly shown a light on that precise aspect of our organization, really pushing for extremely ambitious standards for our students. Are we providing that additional level of rigor? And so while, when you think about what's accomplished in the 12 and 8 years that you've been on this board and all the unique challenges that you've had to deal with, that's just something that I wanted to give particular kudos and credit to the both of you, because it's never, I've only been here a small time period of that time that you've spent on this board, but that's been a consistent piece of your urgings and commitment as long as you've been on this board, and I just wanted to give you that proper respect, because we don't always agree on all things. That's not what we're supposed to. But one thing I think all of us have agreed on is that very fact, and I just wanted to give a real credit to the both of you and your term of service for that as well. With that said, I also want to shine a light on, we have some other folks who are here in our meeting today, and those are our member-elects. So, uniquely, I will be the last appointed superintendent that serves working directly for this board. Now it will be a colleague, a different constitutional officer. Rather than appointed constitutional officer, it will be an elected person who will then, on the 19th, be taking over in this particular piece, serving the exact same function, that executive function. They'll have that opportunity. So major congratulations to our member-elect, our superintendent-elect out there, as well as our two new board member-elects who also will be stepping into your shoes and the roles that we, all three of us, will be leaving our roles and being fulfilled by folks who will now be stepping in that. And so we will just kind of pass that mantle of experience onto those folks. But huge congratulations to the two new board members and the new elected superintendent. I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that the day after that particular election has taken place, and just excitement for the work that will to come beyond us. And that's all I have today, Chairman.
Thank you, Dr. Savage. Today we'll have a student performance at 5:45 p.m. Excited for that. It's been a little bit, hasn't it, for us with the storms. Followed by a board action meeting at 6 o'clock. At this point, having no other business to come before this body and seeing no objection, this meeting is adjourned. The time is 4:46 p.m. Thank you, everyone.